The Georgia Bulldogs run the world of college football today. It's not just my opinion. Ask Nick Saban. He said as much. Until somebody shows us that they can beat the University of Georgia on the football field, it's Georgia's world, especially down south, and everybody else is just living in it. Now, this may not be news. You may not think I'm breaking any news when I say that. You may think that this is obvious, self-apparent to anyone that decides to watch college football religiously. Shoot, you don't even have to watch it religiously. If you were barely paying attention, the one team that you've seen over the last handful of years, Georgia, one of the biggest brands in the sport, no doubt. Yet, here I am saying it again. That's because football's back. We actually have college football to talk about. I wasn't able to be on the air last week, but I'm back with a vengeance, and a lot of things have happened since we last spoke. Georgia went out and took care of business against the top 15 ranked CLEMSON Tiger football team, who then went out the next week and showed that they were not as impotent as Georgia made them look. We saw Texas go on the road and get a big win against the other big boy conference in college football, the Big Ten, and not just get a win, but dismantle the team that is the reigning national champions of the sport. A lot has happened. And even with all of that, I'm here to tell you that your Georgia Bulldogs, they still run the show. We're going to get into that and much more on this edition of the How About That Dogs Cast. Because there is a point to be made here. I'm not just beating my chest. I'm not Pollyannish. I'm not just a sunshine pumper. This is all based in fact. You don't have to look really past this last Saturday against what the Dogs did against Tennessee Tech. I understand it's Tennessee Tech. That's not the point. You don't want to look at that. Look at what they did to Clemson. We are now headed into week 3 of the regular season. And why is that important? Because when we're talking about regular season victories, well, these Dogs under Kirby Smart have now won 41 straight games. 41 consecutive victories in the regular season. Now, you saw me sit in this chair, go through the season, and tell you that I just don't think, based on the schedule and based on the fact that we're all human here, the players, the coaches, all of us within the sound of my voice, we're all human. It seems improbable that Georgia's going to be able to, for the 4th consecutive season, go undefeated at 12-0. So I sat here and said, they're going to lose somewhere. There are a lot of opportunities across what appears to be a very challenging schedule. The easy ones to point out are Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee. But then we started playing games. And even though I said the Dogs are going to lose one somewhere, I don't even want to pick one. I'm going to. I picked Ole Miss. Georgia's going to lose on the road. My brain, on one hand, says there's no way that Ole Miss is now 38 points better than they were last season, regardless of what they did when we weren't actually playing football games. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, again, we're talking about 4 consecutive undefeated seasons here. It's got to end somewhere. This seems like the year I'm going to pick the Rebels. Now, I walked you through why I picked them as opposed to Alabama or Texas or Tennessee or any of the other teams that night. So I'm not going to go through that again. Go back and listen to that episode if you want to know how I feel about the season and how it's going to play out. But again, reality is knocking on the door. And we now have actual football games to look at and say, I might have to eat some crow I might just be dead wrong. It could turn out that this Georgia team is, in fact, good enough to go undefeated in the regular season yet again. Even saying that out loud, I'm saying inside my brain, pump the brakes. You were right the first time. They're not going to be able to do that. It's funny. It's really funny because I literally can go back and forth and convince myself of either scenario if you give me an opportunity. But the thing about reality is that it starts to twist the image, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. We heard all offseason, this Georgia team should be the best. They should have the best roster, or at least one of them. They should be in the playoff. They should be a national title contender. That's what everyone said they should be. Again, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Eventually, you have to play games, and other teams start to show you who they are versus what they should be. Well, really quick, let's just look at what the Dogs were supposed to be versus what they are. And through 2 weeks of the season, they've pretty much looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. They look like a very talented team who was once again really good on defense, who has weapons all over the field, who is coached by the best coach in college football, who runs the best program in college football, and they have a second-year starter at quarterback who is coming out there and running the show the way you would expect a veteran second-year quarterback to do inside the SEC. That's what they look like. Now, I know opposing fans are like, man, they are flipping me off right now. They're like, I don't want to hear it. Show me where I'm wrong. Tell me where they don't look like that. I think you'll be hard-pressed. And then we start to look around the country at who else is in the game when it comes to a handful of teams that could actually win the national championship this year. And we all know who they are. Coming into the year, we were talking about Oregon, right? We were talking about Ohio State. We were talking about Alabama. We were talking about on the fringes, you know, people think Tennessee's an up-and-comer. People think that Ole Miss could get it done. Penn State, even people mentioning Penn State. There are a handful of teams that could pull it off. Games are being played. We get to watch what's happening. We get to see the results. And then we start to reevaluate what we thought we knew. So Georgia's 2-0, looking exactly like we thought they might look through 2 games. Alabama's 2-0. Do we think they look like we thought they were going to look through 2 games? That's actually a more interesting question than you might think it is, because we didn't know, right? New head coach, lots of player movement. You can decide for yourself. Ohio State, we know they have some pretty pieces. That was the story of the offseason. They are 2-0 also. And yeah, those shiny pieces have made some shiny plays. They, unlike some of the other teams we're going to mention, haven't really played anybody. So what do we really know? Not a lot. That they've done what they were supposed to do. What about Oregon? They've played 2 games, both against teams from the state of Idaho. And both weeks, they barely escaped. And they are 2-0. So then you start to think about this question of, is it Georgia or is it the field? In almost every year, you're going to take the field just because it's a better option. Let's continue to look at who else we thought might be in the field. What about Michigan? The defending? No. Reigning? No. In title, national champions from last season. Everyone wanted to tell me it's not as bad as you think it is. Michigan's Michigan. They're going to be fine. Well, based off of just a 2-week sample, I think we know all of that was a bunch of smoke. I think we kind of know who Michigan is. Some of us knew a minute ago. Now the nation knows. Or at least based off of what we've seen, we know something. And why do we think that way? Because one of the other contenders, the University of Texas, went on the road and straight mollywopped them in their own house. Went north of the Mason-Dixon and said, yeah, yo, that was last year. This is this year. We are Texas of, oh yes, the SEC. And they just beat them down. Pantsed them on national television. The game wasn't even close. It was never in doubt. That is the reality. So, I think that when we look at the field versus Georgia, it's fair to say that there are a handful of teams that we thought were going to be real national title contenders that now maybe we hold a different opinion of. Now, it's just 2 weeks in. This is a long season. A lot of things can happen, and teams, especially top-tier teams, should get better week over week and be playing their best football at the end of the year. So, we're not closing the book on any of these teams, but we are saying that out the gate anyway, they don't necessarily look the way we all thought they might. So I think the real question comes down to when you look, and notice I didn't even mention Florida State here, okay? Because people wanted to talk about them in the ACC. There's another team in the ACC that's trying to do something right now, Miami. We'll find out about Miami. They, right now appear to be the front runner in that conference. They still have to play Clemson. Clemson, well, we will learn about Clemson. We knew they could play defense. Can they actually play offense? Or is that just, the result of who they were playing last Saturday? We'll figure it out. Regardless, I don't care about Florida State. Complete frauds, much like Michigan. And now you have Miami and Clemson who are still going to play things out over there in the ACC. Don't talk to me about NC State. Don't talk to me about an improving Georgia Tech. Syracuse, on the other hand, I might listen. But at the end of the day, I don't think they have enough depth to pull that off. But they do have a really good schedule. They could find themselves in that ACC championship game against either Miami or Clemson. We'll see. It'll play itself out. But back to where I was headed. After 2 weeks of the season, I think the biggest question that college football fans, and especially Texas Longhorns fans and Georgia Bulldogs fans, need to ask themselves is, who's better? Who is better? Based off of what we saw Quinn Ewers and Texas do to the Michigan Wolverines versus what we saw the Georgia Bulldogs do to Dabo Swinney and his Clemson Tigers. Who is better? Is it Clemson? Are they the better of the two? Or is it Michigan? Because both teams took a beatdown from a squad that people expect to be in the 12-team playoff and that people think are going to be right there until the very end when it comes to the national championship. So after 2 weeks, who has the better win? Is it Georgia versus Clemson? Or is it Texas over Michigan? And you can weigh this out any way you want to. Neutral site versus a road game, right? National cachet based on the logo or the name of the school. There were a lot of people that might want to say it's definitely Texas. Definitely Texas. because they beat the defending national champions on the road. Fantastic. But here's the bottom line. Last year isn't this year. Last year doesn't matter. Maybe Texas went on the road and beat a mid Big Ten team that's going to finish with 4 or 5 losses. We don't know. Maybe. Now, kudos to them. They did what they were supposed to do to a team that appears to be completely mid. But what is Clemson? Clemson is a team that certainly has some issues on the offensive side of the football, but has a very stout defense, much like Michigan. Clemson still has an opportunity to right their ship based off of what we saw in week 2 from the Tigers. They could still figure it out. Do we think Michigan's going to figure it out offensively? Do we think that Michigan's going to reinvent themselves and somehow become that running juggernaut that they were last year, or find somebody that can play quarterback for them, or call down a witch or a fairy who's going to sprinkle some dust over the team and somehow make them more athletic? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, you're free to argue it however you like and feel whichever way you want to feel. For my money, I'm going to say that Georgia has the best win of the early season. Simply because, as sad as the Clemson fans were after week 1, in week 2, they saw some life out of their offense. I understand who they were playing, but App State is, any way you want to cut it, a championship program. So, yeah, they might not be what we have come to know them to be, but they know how to win. They know how to prepare. They know how to show up and play. They were not intimidated by the Clemson Tigers on Saturday. Clemson just did better things on offense, and the score showed it. We all knew their defense was great. So I think, and again, we're splitting hairs here. It's week 2, but I'm going to give the edge to Georgia for having the best win early in the season here. Again, you can parse it out any way you like, but I do think that question is important, at least here in the first part of the season. So like I said, Georgia runs the world of college football. 41 consecutive regular season victories, 2 out of the last 3 national championships. And from where I'm sitting, they look exactly like what we thought they were. And it's been done year over year enough now to the point where you can simply say Georgia is still Georgia. The only question is, what degree of Georgia are they? Which flavor are they? Well, that's the beauty of this season. We're going to learn the answer to that question. Georgia, as we've talked about many times, has a very challenging schedule. They have to go on the road to play Alabama. They have to go on the road to play Texas, on the road to play Ole Miss. They have to play Tennessee, who everybody all of a sudden is fully bought in on as a top 5 team. So, Georgia is going to have time and time again, opportunity after opportunity to step up and show the college football world exactly who and what they are. Now, Texas doesn't have as many opportunities the rest of the way. All things considered, Texas has a pretty good schedule. And by pretty good, I mean favorable for themselves. I guess one of the biggest hiccups for them is that they are going to have to play their bitter rival, Oklahoma, and then turn around the very next week and welcome in the Georgia Bulldogs, which is going to be difficult for them. But on the whole, their schedule is easier, much easier than what Georgia's is on paper. Which brings me back to who has the best win. Texas did what they had to do against the opponent that they were scheduled to play. Georgia did as well. I think Georgia had the better win. I think that's going to help Georgia down the road as they make their way through the rest of this difficult schedule. And yeah, I'm calling it now. 2 weeks in, I could have been wrong. I maybe should have listened to that like 5% of my voice back there saying, I think they might actually go undefeated again, but I couldn't do it. We'll see. I reserve the right to adjust this in any way I feel necessary moving forward. So on the field in college football right now, Georgia is absolutely the gold standard for what a college football program should look like, and they're still winning, and they still look like it. Georgia is absolutely still Georgia. But I didn't say that they were the standard this season. I didn't say that they were the standard over the last couple of years. I said they were the standard of the college football world. They run the college football world. Why did I say it that way? Because great players in college football want to go play in the NFL. Here's a statistic for you. The University of Georgia, over the last 5 years, has put more players into the NFL than any program in college football. Let me say that again. No school has put more players in the NFL than Georgia in the past 5 years. So, not only is Georgia now the winner of 41 consecutive games between the lines on the field of play in the regular season, they have beaten everybody. They have also sent those players to the NFL at a clip greater than any other program in college football over the past 5 seasons. Not only are they winning it in college football on the field, not only are they among the top 1, 2, 3 recruiting classes year after year after year, but then they take those players, they develop them, and they send them out to go be professional football players. And the NFL is taking notice. They're taking notice of what Kirby Smart is doing at the University of Georgia. This week, Kirby stood at the podium during his weekly press conference and twice said or made reference to, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here. If you want to see the direct quotes, you can go find them or pay attention to my social media. I'm going to put them out for you here over the next day or so. Kirby made direct and specific references to how the NFL feels about his program and what the players that come out of his program mean, what they look like in terms of an NFL prospect. And to boil it all down, what he said was, I have had NFL talent evaluator after talent evaluator tell me that it's really a bummer when a kid decides he can't hack it at Georgia, or he decides he wants to play earlier than he may play at Georgia, or he decides to chase some promise of NIL at another place. They hate to see that for the young man, because what an NFL talent evaluator wants is for that kid to stay at Georgia and truly get developed to the fullest of his potential. They say they don't want to see them developed any other place more than at the University of Georgia. Why? Because when they step off the Woodruff practice fields in Athens and they take their talents to the NFL, what was it D'Amico Ryan said earlier this year about Georgia players? He said, if you get a player from Georgia, you know you've got a football player, because that's what they produce. The secret is out. And here's the kicker. If you're a casual fan, and I'm not saying that in a slanderous way, I'm just saying if you say don't follow the NFL draft, or maybe you really only follow the NFL and Georgia's kind of your second interest or whatever it is, What I'm about to say, you're going to call me a liar. You're going to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I guarantee you I do, friends. NFL talent evaluators, when it comes to the University of Georgia, do not care about your statistics. They do not care how early you played in your career in college. They do not care about anything that you might see on game tapes that say you put tape against tape, you might see on game tapes if you transfer out and go play somewhere else. They don't care about any of those things. They care about quality over quantity. They care about the way, the process by which Georgia goes through their practices, the way they do everything. The first thing they want to see is the hundreds of reps that you get each week on the practice fields at Georgia. They want to come and look firsthand at the players that Georgia has on campus. Then they want to look at the practice tape to see how you performed and how you improved over your time there. Because they know that every day you are going against the very best players in college football. If you're a defensive lineman, you're banging heads with one of the best offensive linemen or one of the best offensive lines in college football. Flip it around. You're an offensive lineman, you got to block the likes of Michael Williams, who, oh, by the way, is probably going to be a top 5 draft pick. Can you hold up against him? That's what I care about. If you're Carson Beck, you are having to try to beat that defense every day in practice. Who's on that defense? All-Americans at every level. Do you know what to do with the football? Can you take coaching? Did you improve? Development. That is what the NFL talent evaluators want to see. And right now, the numbers bear it out. Nobody, no school is better at developing players and getting them into the NFL right now than the University of Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs run the world of college football. And it's like Nick Saban said, somebody's got to prove that they can beat them. I'm not telling you that this team cannot be beaten. For goodness sake, like I said, I predicted them to lose a game this year in the regular season. But what I am telling you, and this is a cold, hard fact, and I don't care if you like it, reality is what it is. Georgia is the standard. The sport runs through Athens. And until you do it against the Dogs, it don't count. Essentially, what is it that old saying? Pictures or it didn't happen. I think that's where everybody is with Georgia right now. And I think everybody's completely comfortable with that. So, does that mean the Dogs are going to win the national title this year? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that they're not going to lose a game in the regular season? No, it doesn't. But it is the state of play in college football right now. And that's pretty impressive because where we are in the state of play in college football right now is we are headed into week 3. And we've done this many times. We've looked at the schedule over and over and over, but the next one up is the next one you can beat. It's the next opportunity that you have to show the world exactly what you're about. And this week, that is going to be the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, during the entire offseason, I spoke very highly of Kentucky. I think that Kentucky is a quality program with a quality head coach. I think they are tough. I think they play football the right way. And I think that if you underestimate them, you do so at your own peril. I know that they have wonderful players on the defensive side of the football. The only question was, are they going to be able to now do something on the offensive side of the ball, given the changes they've had on the roster? Will they be able to play complementary football the way they want to? If they can, then they are a real threat. Back to that reality thing, 2 weeks into the season, I don't know. We're learning some things about Kentucky. We're learning that, and some of us have said in the past that as much as he's a great dude, a wonderful teammate, and just a good person, Brock Vandagriff didn't play at Georgia for a reason. Now, there are voices out there in the Georgia football community who do what I do, who talk about this kind of stuff. Now, they don't do what I do professionally, but they're supposed to be in the know. And especially earlier in his career, people wanted you to think that, BVG was a can't miss prospect. Man, he could throw that ball real hard. We all know there's more to playing quarterback than just that. And I'm not trying to speak ill of the young man. I think he's a great dude. I think he was a wonderful Georgia Bulldog. I think he got better during his time in Athens, but he's not in Athens anymore. And that makes him the opponent, and for at least one weekend, the enemy. And if Kentucky trots him out there against the Dogs like they did last week against South Carolina, and he has that kind of performance, it's going to be a long day on the bluegrass for Brock and the Kentucky Wildcats. Big Blue has made me rethink my entire opinion of who and what they are or what they could be this year. Because the Dogs are on the hunt. The gates have been opened. They're out and running. We know what they look like, and now we know what Kentucky looks like. I don't think Kentucky has much of an identity about who they are. And that couldn't be a good thing for Kentucky. I'll have a few more words to say about them on the back half here. But the thing about Georgia is that they don't care about what Kentucky did against South Carolina last week. It's like I said, the Dogs are on the hunt. And we feel good about where Georgia is right now and where we think they're going. Why? Because of what we're seeing from players like Arian Smith. That was one name that was on everybody's lips during this offseason. Man, if Arian can pull it together, if he can find it, if he can be the player we all think he can be, look out. Through 2 games, we have seen a concerted effort to get the ball to number 11 all over the field in a bunch of different ways. And so far, all we've seen from Arian Smith is catch after catch, and he's using his skill set to be the best player he can be. So far, it's stock up on 11 and Arian Smith. One more question answered. When you looked at Georgia's roster and you're like, I have a question here, a little question there. This is one that a lot of people had that is being answered in a way that we all hoped it would be. Again, I am rooting for number 11 as much as I am for any individual Georgia Bulldog player this year, because I know how hard he's worked. The work he's put in behind the scenes to bet on himself and come back and prove exactly who and what he can be through 2 games. Knock on wood for good health and everything else. He's doing just that. And that is very, very, very promising for the Georgia Bulldogs offense. But he's not doing it alone. What was another question? Could Branson Robinson come back anywhere near the form that we saw him display as a freshman? Through 2 games, yeah. I understand he was getting his feet wet against Clemson, looked a little tentative. Hell, I would have too. When you come back from a major injury the way he did, the hardest thing to get right is between your ears. The perception of whether or not you're ready to cut out there and cut it loose. And if we're being completely honest, He didn't get a lot of help on the plays that he was handed the football against Clemson either, because that Clemson defense, which I have said time and time again, is very, very stout, played the game very well when Branson happened to take the ball. So put those two things together. He didn't have a huge first week. In terms of carries and overall production, he didn't have a huge second week. But what you can see clearly is that now his knee, his legs are under him. They are physically stable. This part is coming back with every carry. And when we saw that touchdown run that he had, again, I know it's Tennessee Tech against Tennessee Tech. It wasn't that he got into the end zone. It was the will and the power and the drive of his resolution that we could see. He was not going to be denied. It didn't matter who the other team was. It was the way he went about doing what he did. We don't know how the season's going to play out, of course, but all signs are pointing up when it comes to Branson Robinson. That is a wonderful thing, especially when you look at the depth that Georgia's running back room already has, because it's only going to get better. There's another guy that's in there with him, Trevor Etienne. We saw him come out. Trevor earned a collar for me this week as one of the Dogs' Beasts of the Week. Each week after the game, I look and see who impacted the game in a way that might warrant nomination for Beast of the Week. And then I throw it open to you guys and I say, hey, let me know, who do you think earned a collar this week? And every week I get, 5, 10 different names. And then I look at it, sort through it, weigh it out, and there you go. We come up with the Beast of the Week. This week, Trevor Etienne, 5 carries, 2 catches. He had an explosive run of 45 yards. And over the course of his 7 touches, averaged 13 yards every time he took the football. That's explosive. He looked every bit the part of what we thought he would be once he got plugged into this offense. When you have Etienne doing what he did last week, when you have Frazier doing what he did against Clemson, when you have Branson Robinson running the way he showed us he is going to run, proving to us that he's healthy. And then not to mention the other guys down the depth chart, Cash Jones, Chauncey Bowens, Dwight Phillips Jr. Georgia's running back room is crazy deep. It's you really run the risk of I have to get so many people the ball. It's a problem. I trust Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo to figure that part out. I'm just saying, these dogs are hunting and they are loaded for bear, especially when it comes to who we see in the backfield. But they're not alone. The other question about Georgia was the freshmen, the secondary. Who's going to play back there? Are they going to have to rely on true freshmen? Here's the thing. They don't have to rely on true freshmen. They are choosing to play these young players because they are just that good. Players like KJ Bolden, meaningful reps in the back end at safety. Giving the Dogs the flexibility to change course on a dime, the way they did ahead of the Clemson game. Take Malachi Starks, an All-American at safety, pull him away from safety, play him at star, and then put Dan Jackson and KJ Bolden back at safety, and just continue to shut down the Clemson Tigers offense. And then last week, Jonel Aguero gets back in the game. Malachi bumps back to safety. KJ's still getting reps back there with Dan Jackson. What was a concern, a question for this Georgia team heading into the season? And there weren't many, But this one is yet another one that has been answered because these young players are playing, and they're playing well, and they're playing meaningful snaps that are only going to make them that much better down the road. Ellis Robinson also getting snaps. Ja'Cory Thomas also getting snaps. The depth is there. Now it's just about getting these dudes comfortable, getting them experience. So Georgia's hunting. And it just keeps getting better because you've got guys like C.J. Allen continuing to improve. Raylan Wilson continuing to improve. You see it on tape if you're watching the games. And another dude that got a collar this week, first time showing up on the Beast of the Week, TID, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. 5-star player, has been hurt essentially his entire career. Never had a full season at the University of Georgia. And then this year is showing up healthy and is flashing the way he did when he was healthy in the years past. You understand why he was a 5-star dude. He had 4 tackles on Saturday. 3 of them were tackles for loss. Think back to how he wreaked havoc against the Florida offense last season after coming back from injury. If 93 continues to come on the way he's come on the first 2 games of the season, if he can manage to stay healthy and show the entire world everything that he's all about, that Georgia defensive line, which I talked about as much as anybody else, saying that I think, well, we have a question there. They have to improve, build the depth, all that. 93 goes a long way in making that happen. And that unit, the way we view it, changes entirely. Michael Williams is out right now with an ankle. Could be back this week, maybe not. Maybe they sit him again, give him a bye week, have him ready to go against Alabama. You pair him with a healthy TID, a healthy Warren Brinson, and all those young bucks that are chomping at the bit to get off the chain. This unit changes entirely. And all those questions that we had about Georgia and whether or not they were going to be able to be what we thought they were, they just start falling away one after the other. And you start to think, yeah, Georgia is absolutely still Georgia. That's what I see through 2 weeks. So this is a bit of a 2-week review. We had time to get our feet wet. We had time to wade out just a little bit and get the feel of college football. And this is where I think we are right now. And now the Dogs are on the road trying to make it 42 straight with their conference opener at Kentucky this Saturday. Now, I already said a couple things about Kentucky and what I think they, are currently. But coming into the year, and I'm just going to reiterate it again, I said a lot of things about how good I thought Kentucky could be, how this game could be just a little bit of a danger, even though Georgia blew them out last year in Athens. This team that I've seen in Kentucky through 2 weeks, forget the fact that there are Georgia Bulldogs on that roster now, former Georgia Bulldogs on that. Forget that. The things that I've seen from this Kentucky team right now have me reevaluating Big Blue entirely. I don't think they have a good idea of who they want to be on offense. They have talent. They have talent at wide receiver. I don't think that offensive line is anything like the Big Blue wall that we've seen over the last, say, 5-6 seasons up there when they were run first team. They can still run it a little bit, but they're not the same. And when you don't know who you are and you have a new guy at quarterback trying to make it go, when you can't hang your hat on something as an offense, you get what you saw against South Carolina if you're Kentucky. You get an offense where Brock Vandegrift, during his time in the game, only threw it 10 times. This is 2024. This is not 1980. This is not 3 yards in a cloud of dust football anymore. Certainly not in college game. And yet, Brock threw it 10 times. 3 drops included in his misses. I don't know. Kentucky they've shown me enough to make me just lose my faith in who I thought they could be. I still believe they've got really good players on that defense. I still know that they're going to come and try to play physical against Georgia. But I don't think it's going to matter. I think this Kentucky Wildcats team is nowhere near the Kentucky Wildcats team that came to Athens last year, and we saw how that one played out. I think Georgia is about to put one on Kentucky. You say, didn't they do that last year? Yeah. This one could be worse. I think the spread's over 20-something. I think Georgia covers. It sounds ridiculous to hear myself say that. A road game in the SEC against a team that I have respect for because of the way they play the game, and yet I just don't think that they're going to have it. I just don't think so. Because even if they come out believing for the first 3 minutes of the game, Georgia lines up, has a little bit of success. One thing goes wrong for Kentucky, and it's Katie bar the door. Kentucky, even though they're a good program, has gotten themselves into the position to where they have enough transfer impact on their team that they're not Colorado or Florida State where they go full-on mercenary, but they have guys in certain positions that carry a lot of weight. And when you turn the quarterback over the way they do, when you turn the offensive coordinator over the way they do or have in the last few years, it hurts you as a program. I think that's what we're seeing with Kentucky. They don't have an offensive identity. And as good as that defense might be, they're not going to be able to hold up and handle everything that Georgia's bringing with them when they come to play on the Bluegrass this weekend. And I think it's going to be a long day for the Kentucky Wildcats against Georgia on Saturday. So we can start this thing, or we can come right back to where we started this thing and let you know that college football runs through Athens. The Georgia Bulldogs run the sport of college football today in the way that they win on the field, in the way that they win off the field, on the recruiting trail, in the way that they run their program, in the way that they develop players and send them to the next level. Georgia is currently unmatched in their success. But it's not even a point of bragging or trying to argue. It is a simple fact in the world of college football right now. Georgia is made up of human beings. They can be beaten. But until somebody does it, well, the king is the king. And that's a good place to be if you are a Georgia Bulldogs fan. So until next time, y'all make sure that you take care of yourselves, take care of your friends, take care of your families and each other. And go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.